So hello, everyone. Welcome to our first in the series of pop-up PD webinars for 2024-25. We had originally scheduled this one in June, but we decided to delay it so that we would be able to provide you with a little more information now that we're in late summer. Can't believe that we're in late summer. We will be repeating this webinar, the very same one, on October 24th, as you can see on the opening slide here. Our topic for today is to look at the Skills for Success resources that were developed by our LBS support organizations in phase 2 of the Skills for Success initiative. And you might see that I'm looking back and forth. I do have 2 screens open. So in addition to our welcomes in the chat, I'll introduce myself. My name is Barb Glass. I am the executive director of one of the provincial LBS support organizations, and that is the College Sector Committee for Adult Upgrading. So the support organization that works with all of our public colleges in delivering LBS. And the CSC, as we're known by our short form, also holds the service provider agreement to deliver one of the 5 LBS eChannel programs, ACE Distance. So we both have a service provider role and a support organization role. Really happy to be here with you today. It feels like ages since I've been sitting in front of the computer doing a webinar. So it's nice to see some of you online today. I would like to start with a statement of recognition that although today we are meeting virtually, we'd like to take a moment to recognize, respect, and acknowledge the importance of the lands that we occupy and from which we benefit. So today, let's reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to improve relationships between nations, and of course, our own understanding of the local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. And let's also remind ourselves that wherever we are, we do live on the ancestral and unceded territory of our Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people. A little bit on the next slide about the pop-up PD for Literacy Educators series that has been brought to you every year for many years now as a result of a collaboration between a number of different LBS regional networks and provincial support organizations, as you can read on the slide. If you are interested in looking at any previous pop-up PD sessions, there is a live link here in the presentation, and when the presentation is posted, you would be able to access that. You can also just Google pop-up PD. Pretty much it comes up and takes you to a link on the Contact North site where all of our past pop-up PD webinars are located. And I just would like to now take a second and let my co-presenter Robyn introduce herself before we go any further. Robyn, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Robyn Ritchie, and I will be co-presenting with Barb this afternoon. I'm the Executive Director of Laubach Literacy Ontario, which is another support organization in Ontario. I also manage a school board LBS program, so I have both of those roles and bring that to the table when I'm doing these presentations. Like Barb, I haven't done a webinar in quite some time, so it's kind of nice to be back and start the year off running with a webinar right before the new school year starts. So welcome everybody today, and we look forward to doing this with you.
Great, thank you, Robyn. Just also want to welcome our American Sign Language interpreters today, Carolyn and Melissa. Thank you very much for being with us. So this webinar is being interpreted. It's also being recorded, as you saw at the beginning, so that we can post it for future reference or for people who aren't able to attend today. Heather Robinette, who is from the Executive Director of the Quill Network, is also here. She's helping to moderate today. And Stacy from Contact North, who is our technical expert and support. If you do have a technical issue, Stacy will likely be able to help you. And it looks like, I'm just scrolling back through the chat, it looks like people are pretty well set up now. So as I said, I'll be looking back and forth just depending on which screen I'm looking at as I'm speaking for the first little while. So once again, bonjour, Annie, hello. We'll have a look quickly at our topics for today. Robyn and I did present two, if not three, probably two webinars last year that were similar to this one. Last year's webinars covered information about the 2022-23 resources that were developed for the Skills for Success project. Now that we're into August of 2024, we wanted to be able to recap for you some of the work that went on in the second year or phase 2 of the Skills for Success project. If you did attend one of those webinars last year, you'll probably find numbers number 1 and possibly number 2 are basically just a review. Sorry, cat just knocked some files off my desk. So we will spend a little bit less time on numbers 1 and 2 in this webinar than we did last year, because some of you are already familiar with some of those topics. And if you're not as familiar, hopefully you'll get a little bit of a refresher or some new knowledge around numbers 1 and 2. About halfway through the slides, Robyn and I will switch and I will pass things over to her. So let's quickly just take a look at the essential skills framework from back in the late 80s. And once again, if you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat. Between Robyn and I and Heather and Stacy will be monitoring the chat and happy to respond to your questions as we go along or at the end. Stacy also asked me to remind everyone that there will be an evaluation survey, a very short evaluation survey that will pop up when you exit from the webinar. It's a little different than previous pop-up PD surveys that we've done because it is attached right into the Zoom account. So you'll see it when you exit, and then when Stacy closes the webinar, you may also see it again in your browser. If you do have to leave early, we would still really appreciate you just taking a moment and filling out the quick survey, unless of course you're only here for a very short time, in which case it might not be useful. But if you're able to stay at least for most of it, the feedback is always great in helping us to plan for other webinars. So back to essential skills. In the late 80s and early 90s, the federal government created something called the Essential Skills Framework. And it was widely adopted and used by some provinces to help guide some of their training and education and workforce development. In other provinces, perhaps a bit less so. So it was originally developed to identify the very key skills and levels of competency that are required for Canadians to function successfully in the workplace at a variety of jobs, and in life and in further learning. This framework had quite a strong emphasis on the employment or work category in terms of how these skills could be applied. And through the Essential Skills Research Project and the associated activities of the federal government at the time, in addition to this framework, there were a number of resources that were made available. And most significantly, I think, were the many, many essential skills occupational profiles that were developed. And some of you may have seen some of them. They were quite detailed profiles related to various occupational sectors or occupational clusters of jobs, and how each of the 9 essential skills was used in that job, and the level at which the essential skills would have been required to be competent in the job. The framework included 5 levels of competency, 1 being the least complex and 5 being the most complex. So those original 9 essential skills are here on this graphic: reading, document use. Well, I won't read them. You can see them, and many of you probably are familiar with them if you've been working in this field for a while. One of my favorite sayings that was coined by a colleague from Alberta years ago is that essential skills are the Velcro to which all other education and training sticks. I thought that was a fantastic kind of analogy to essential skills, because what that is really saying, of course, is that the stronger one's essential skills in things like reading, numeracy, writing, oral communication, and so on, the easier it is to be successful in new endeavors, whether it's on the job or in general life or related to education. So in other words, if we have stronger essential skills, we're more likely to be successful at other kinds of training and education. I would always wish I could take credit for that little saying, but it's not mine. That was our quick review of the Essential Skills Framework that the federal government created in the late 80s. So now let's move on, and we'll fast forward to this much more recent time, since 2020, 2021. And at that time, the federal government launched their new Skills for Success framework. And it was really an updating and reworking of that original late 1980s Essential Skills framework. It does stand to reason that it needed updating because life, learning, and work have changed a lot since the late 1980s. In many regards, even if we just consider, for example, technology, how vastly it's changed in the last 30 or 40 years. So over the course of several years, the government undertook and did a lot of consultation and project work related to creating this new Skills for Success framework that was launched in 2021. So we'll just take a quick look in the next couple of slides about the similarities and differences between the original Essential Skills framework and the new Skills for Success framework. This graphic that you see on the screen now is directly from the federal government's Skills for Success website. In the next slide or two, we'll compare the 2 sets of skills side by side, the original Essential Skills and the new Skills for Success. But you can read here what the labels or names of the Skills for Success that were launched in the new framework. There's still 9. Some of them exist in the same form as they did originally in the Essential Skills framework. Others have changed a little. So we'll illustrate that shortly. It's also interesting that the ministry's own, the federal government's own graphic representation of this is in a circle, because it does kind of imply that none of those skills necessarily stands on its own, but they work collectively together. So it is an interesting choice of shape that they're circular, and I think that does show the integration of those skills a little more than presenting them in a list. And just before we compare the two sets of skills, we just wanted to show you just a snapshot of the Government of Canada's Skills for Success website. This is the landing page. You can search for it by searching Skills for Success. And there are a number of different pieces now on this website. We won't go into detail about them today, but there is a link underneath if you want the direct link. And Robin did post the PDF version of this presentation in the chat. So if you would like to download that and save it now, you're welcome to. It will be posted on the Pop-Up PD site after the recording is completed and verified. But if you do want the PDF, feel free to download it to either follow along or just to save it and have those links that you'll see today readily available. So interestingly, just to highlight the statement on this page of the government's website, Skills for Success provide Canadians with everyday skills needed for work, learning, and life, which was really the same as in the original Essential Skills Framework. Improving them will help you succeed in today's and tomorrow's workplaces. So there is still a strong focus on the workplace application of these skills, but we also know, of course, that they are really important in pursuing further learning and education and just functioning in everyday society. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, here is a little graphic that shows the comparison between the original Essential Skills Framework and the new Skills for Success Framework. You can see that the first three skills listed in red from the Essential Skills Framework, reading, writing, and numeracy, still appear with those same titles in the Skills for Success model. So that didn't change. Computer use, you can see, is now called digital. Makes sense because with changes in technology, digital skills is vastly different than it was when we all just had a PC in front of us, or an Apple, or whatever computer we were using at the time. You can see that thinking has been re-envisioned as problem solving. Again, probably a much more current way to look at the thinking skills that are required in our day-to-day life and in work and learning. Oral communication, you can see, has been modified and broadened to include communication more generally, not just oral communication. Working with others has been revised and is now called collaboration. Again, much more current terminology. The next one I find quite interesting, that continuous learning has really morphed into a somewhat new type of skill called adaptability. And then finally, document use, you'll see is crossed out on the bottom of the original essential skills framework. It doesn't mean that people don't need to use documents anymore. It just means that document use is now embedded in many of those new skills for success, instead of it being a standalone skill. I mean, we use documents an enormous amount now online. So one could see a fit for document use within digital. We use documents to solve problems. We use documents to communicate, etc. So it does also seem reasonable now that we have document use embedded within the other skills. And then that brings us to the last skill on the list of the new skills for success model, which is creativity. It's actually creativity and innovation. But that's a new one that really wasn't directly referenced in any way in the old essential skills framework. So again, another change with the times sort of approach, in that creativity and innovation is required in many areas of life, learning, and work, and perhaps deserves its own standalone skill. Okay, not seeing any questions in the chat. So I will just move on with the next few slides. So in terms of our quick review, last piece of the quick review for today is just how the Skills for Success framework briefly how it intersects with our Ontario Adult Literacy Curriculum framework that we use in the LBS programs. Again, if you attended a couple of our webinars last year, you'll recognize these little graphics with the bubbles. So just a quick review of an illustration of the fact that in any of our 6 OALCF competencies, we can envision how many of the skills for success fit in and or are used within our competencies. We've just put a few examples together here to show you today. Understand and use numbers. That's competency C in the OALCF. Well, all of the little bubbles, reading, problem solving, digital, creativity, collaboration, writing, numeracy, all of those could potentially be used with understand and use numbers. Doesn't mean that all of them are used all of the time when we're working with developing competencies for understand and use numbers. But it's just an illustration that many of the skills for success fit under this particular competency of understand and use numbers. So 2 more examples of that. We picked also use digital technology. That's competency D in the OALCF. And I think if I count right, yes, you can see all 9 of the skills for success are or could be embedded at some point in using digital technology, just depending on what ways we're applying digital technology and what kind of devices we're using. Again, it doesn't mean that all of these 9 skills for success are used in every digital task that we do. I keep looking up to my right out my window because we have a thunderstorm warning here. And I had said to my co-host Robyn at the beginning, if I end up in a thunderstorm, I might not be able to stay connected and it'll be up to her to carry on. But we're almost at her portion of the session anyway. And then finally, just one more example, competency F, engage with others. Again, a number of different skills for success could be embedded within the engage with others competency depending on the sort of activities or requirements that someone is undertaking. And there's lots of different contexts, of course, for engage with others, especially when you think about engaging in the workplace versus engaging in education versus engaging in our everyday life with friends or family members or people we, interact with in business. So these examples were just meant to illustrate the very broad nature of the OALCF in that it does encompass many of the skills for success within our various competencies. All right, moving on to number 2, a quick review of what happened in Skills for Success Phase 1 and 2 for our literacy and basic skills programs. If we think back almost 2 years now to the fall of 2022, our ministry that funds LBS, the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training, and Skills Development, or MLITSD is a shorter way to refer to them. They applied for and received funding from the federal government's Skills for Success program. And they applied for that funding so that they could provide some of it to LBS support organizations in Phase 1 to do some resource development and other activities that we'll talk about. And then Phase 2, as many of you know, also included some service delivery pilots around the Skills for Success projects. And the area of the federal government responsible for the Skills for Success program is Employment and Social Development Canada. That's why it's highlighted on your slide here. So you may recall, if you were familiar with the Phase 1 in 2022-23, that there were 5 themes that were related to Phase 1 of the Skills for Success funding. And these were themes that our ministry identified as priorities in their application for funding to the federal government. So of course, we have apprenticeship integration, Better Jobs Ontario or BJO integration. You'll recall that Better Jobs Ontario was in the past called Second Career. Second Career program changed and was redesigned into Better Jobs Ontario a few years ago. We also had the themes of expanding and enhancing digital delivery, supporting underrepresented groups, and workplace literacy. Sometimes you might have seen the workplace literacy theme called workplace delivery, but it was the same thing. And when we talk about workplace delivery or workplace literacy, we are really talking about providing services directly to employers and workers at workplaces outside of our regular LBS program delivery. So it was a special category for working specifically with employers and workers, as opposed to the more mainstream LBS programming that we would normally deliver. So in November of 22, in Phase 1, our 10 provincial LBS support organizations received funding for developing Skills for Success related resources. So last year's webinars, we highlighted those, some of those resources that were developed in Phase 1. Also in Phase 1, all of our 16 regional networks, or at least 15 of the 16, I believe, received Skills for Success funding to conduct some community integration activities related to the Skills for Success themes that you saw on the previous page. So resource development and integration activities were the two things funded in phase one. There were almost 200 resources developed in phase one under these 4 different themes. So the numbers in the brackets just indicate the number of resources that were developed under each of those themes. You may have already viewed or used some of these. They are posted on the LBS resources forum, which we'll illustrate for you a bit later in the presentation. As well as the almost 200 that were developed under those 4 themes. Another 39 were developed by our LBS eChannel providers. And moving along to phase 2 in 2023-24. Once again, the LBS support organizations were invited to apply for curriculum resource development funds, and many of those 10 support organizations did so. It wasn't a requirement to apply for that funding, but most of the support organizations did apply for and request funding. We were invited to apply for funding under 3 of the themes for the resource development in phase 2, supporting apprentices, supporting underrepresented groups, and workplace literacy. So again, the numbers in brackets represent approximately the number of resources developed in phase 2. So a total of about 120. The expanding and enhancing digital delivery resources were specific to the 5 eChannel programs in phase 2. And so another 27 were developed by the eChannel providers for use in our 5 eChannel programs. And what else happened in phase 2? Just a couple more slides before I pass things over to Robyn to talk about the actual phase 2 resources. 2 other things happened in phase 2 besides the second round of resource development. One was that the 16 regional LBS networks were invited to apply for more community integration projects under the 4 themes listed below. It's quite possible that some of you participated in one or more of the Skills for Success projects that were undertaken by your local regional network. Again, excuse me. It was completely voluntary to apply for funding, and it was voluntary to participate in any of these projects from the service provider side. Sorry, just lost my voice there for a sec. And then finally, what else has happened in phase 2? The big thing that happened in phase 2 that didn't happen in phase 1 was that LBS service providers were also invited to apply for Skills for Success service delivery pilot projects under 3 of the Skills for Success themes: supporting underrepresented groups, supporting Better Jobs Ontario, and workplace literacy. Through that request or opportunity for funding, which happened through the business planning process in 23-24, there were about 120 service delivery pilots that were funded across all of our LBS delivery sectors and cultural streams. And kind of not surprisingly, of those, the majority, or well over half, were in the supporting underrepresented groups theme. So the LBS providers who were awarded a pilot project also had to enter CAMS data around the participants and the learner plans and so on that of the learners participating in the pilots. But that data was sectioned off in CAMS separately from the sort of regular or mainstream LBS programs that were being delivered. So that has enabled the ministry to pull out data specifically about those 120 Skills for Success service delivery pilots, separate from the regular CAMS data that they pull out for all of our ongoing delivery. And right now, the ministry is looking at the data from the service delivery pilots, and as Robyn will address a bit later, they're using it in a couple of different ways to learn more about LBS delivery, how much it costs, what are some of the priorities, and so on. And I'm now going to pass things over to Robyn for the second half of our presentation today. I again don't see anything in the chat, so Robyn, it's all yours, and I'll go to the next slide.
Thanks, Barb. Before I get started, I just want to remind everybody that we did post a copy of the presentation in the chat. And I'm just reminding you of this because there are a lot of links in this portion of the presentation. So if you download it, you'll be able to access all the information via those links directly. The slide deck will also be posted next week on eChannel. So just a reminder. I'm going to talk about how to find the resources and also give you a little bit of an overview of what was developed. So most of the resources from phase 1 and phase 2 have now been posted on the site called the Literacy Resources and Discussion Forum. So this is the place to go if you want to look for resources, not just Skills for Success resources, but resources in general that support LBS programming. Next slide. So this website that I'm going to walk you through was created several years ago, and it's a partnership between Community Literacy of Ontario, Laubach Literacy of Ontario, and it is actually hosted by Contact North. When we were initially discussing what to do in terms of making sure these resources were accessible to everybody, we talked about using this site because it already existed and it was a good site to continue to promote and make sure that people had access to the new resources. That being said, each of the organizations who developed resources in both phase 1 and phase 2, for the most part, are also hosting those resources on their own individual websites for their own membership groups. But this site puts everything in one place for everybody. Many of the resources have been translated into French. Some were developed in French first and translated into English, but much of the translation from phase 2 is still underway because of just the volume of material that was developed through these projects. The site actually has 7 categories on it to organize the Skills for Success specific resources. So within the categories are apprenticeship, Better Jobs Ontario, digital delivery eChannel, underrepresented groups, workplace literacy, and success stories. For the digital delivery eChannel category, you're not actually accessing the resources, you're just accessing a description of whatever was developed and will actually be delivered through a particular eChannel organization. Not all the resources have been added yet. We're still waiting for some of them to get completed, which seems crazy because we're halfway through the year. But again, the volume of material that was created was enormous. So things are still getting finished up. But as I said, we continuously add to this site. In fact, I added 2 resources this morning. So it's a great place to go. Next slide, please. So when you go to this site, what you can do is select the theme that you would like to access from the left-hand side menu. Skills, there's different categories or chunks of themes within the website. Under Skills for Success, I just went through the categories. There's actually a separate section for the French resources now because we have so many. So there's a Skills for Success French section as well, where you can just go directly to that section if you're looking for a French resource. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of an example from the apprenticeship theme. So when you open up one of the annotations, essentially you're going to get the title, the author, the date, and then an annotation for that resource. It just gives you a bit of information about the resource itself. So this is the first part of the page. And I am seeing something on my screen right now. Sorry, just thank you. Okay, just checking. So you're going to see this at the top of the entry for each resource. So this is the apprenticeship answers. The author is Community Literacy of Ontario. This resource was published in 2023, and the funder is MLITSD. Then the annotation starts, and that annotation is based on whatever was provided by the organization that created that resource. Slide. As you scroll down, you're going to see some more information for each Skills for Success entry. So there will be a URL link to a different site if the resource has already been posted somewhere else, and that's usually on the organization's own site. The files themselves, or the actual copies of the resource that you can download directly from the resources forum, have been added where possible. Not in every case this isn't possible, but for the most part, the files are there. This solves the problem of if a URL moves and you can't find the resource from a URL, we do have a hard copy on the site. It also identifies the Skills for Success that are integrated into that particular resource. So in this case, I think all 9 are integrated into the resource example that I selected for this. And then at the bottom, you'll have tags. So in this case, the tags are apprenticeship, SFS, which is Skills for Success, and skilled trades. The tags have been added to help with the search function of the site. So if you're looking for something in particular, I'll talk a little bit about the search function as we go on. The tags will help you look for things. Anything that was developed during phase 1 of Skills for Success has a SFS, just plain SFS. If it was developed during phase 2, the tag will say SFS2. Sorry, go ahead. Next slide, Barb. So here's just another example from the underrepresented groups theme. I've squished it so it all fits on one slide this time. So in this case, the resource is called Promoting Inclusion. The author is Kesba. Again, it was published in 2023 and funded by our ministry. You have a very short annotation, which just gives you a snapshot of what's that resource is about. Here, there is a URL link, which allows you to access it directly from where Kesba is storing it, but the file is also there. And then the skills for success are listed. So this is what you're going to see with pretty much every entry. As much information as what was available will be here. The idea is that you're able to quickly grab a resource that you need or want to look at without having to go through up to, I don't know, there's 20 or 10 support organizations plus 16 regional networks. So if any resources that have been developed that are on here, that way you don't have to go from website to website to website. Okay, next slide, please. So there's some other features on this website that will help you out. On the very front page, the landing page, there is a little explainer video there. It just kind of walks you through how you might search for something or narrow down something within a category. At the top right-hand corner, there is a search function. It's a global search function for the site. However, in order to use that global search function effectively, you do have to create an account on the site. You can use the site as a guest. You can also create an account. An account will give you the ability to actually utilize that search function properly. Okay, next slide. So before I go on, I just want to make sure there aren't any questions. Okay, I don't see any. So for the Skills for Success resources, most of the resources do include a cover page. So everybody was provided with a template, and to try to collect similar information to maintain consistency, some of them include a cover page that is similar to this example. Others actually didn't use the cover page and integrated the information in different ways. But it just, when you open several resources, you will see this cover page, and it just gives you a little bit of information when it was a Skills for Success resource. It does include an OALCF alignment. So it's going to give you a sense of what competency, task group, and level are integrated into that resource. In addition to, next slide, please. In addition to some additional information, which includes the goal paths that are applicable for that resource, and then again, the essential skills. So this information will be integrated into the resource itself. We didn't put all of that information onto the annotation on the website for logistical reasons, but this is great for you to have if you're looking for resources and you want to see if they're a good fit for your LBS program. Okay, so I'm going to just highlight some of the phase 2 resources that were developed. As Barb mentioned, the count is somewhere around 120 plus, but we don't have a perfect count right now because we're still having some things coming in. And because the definition of what a resource was from the perspective of the ministry was wide, not all things are equal to each other. So some of the resources are multi-part. Some of them include different components. Sometimes a resource might have been done as both a paper-based resource and also an online module. So those are actually two different resources. It just depended on what each organization felt was most needed in their particular, the particular group that they serve. So the great thing about it is that we have a vast and wide array of new resources. In some cases, organizations also updated tried and true resources that really needed a refresh, because this was the first time we had an opportunity to do this in many, many years. So I'll just give you, I'm going to walk you through the different categories and give you just a snapshot. I'm not going to read them all to you, but you can see that there is a wide array of materials in phase 2 that were developed to support apprenticeship, from food services to childcare worker to masonry to just learning about the apprenticeship system in Ontario in general, construction. There was a very large array of materials that were developed. On each of these slides at the bottom, you will notice there is a link to a Google Doc. That Google Doc actually gives you the full list of all the resources developed in phase 2, or resources that are being still finished up in phase 2. And within that document for each resource, there is a link that takes you directly to the resources forum where you can access that resource. So we tried to connect everything, all the pieces of information, to make it easy for practitioners. Some people just want to look at a list. Other people might want to do some investigation on the actual website, but you can actually link from the list directly to the website to make it easy for you to find things. Okay, next page. So underrepresented groups, here is another sampling of some of the resources developed in phase 2. Again, very, very varied number of resources, exploring your public library, disclosing disability in a workplace, the mental health and addictions curriculum. So there's a lot of different curriculum that was developed. Newcomers, there was actually a big focus on newcomers because we're seeing a lot of newcomer groups accessing literacy and basic skills right now due to just the lack of English language training funding that's out there at the moment. So this gives you just, again, a snapshot of some of the resources that were developed to support underrepresented groups. It's such a wide category that, you know, you just see all sorts of things being developed that organizations identified as needs within their different member groups. Next slide. Workplace literacy. Workplace has been obviously a focus through all of this, and lots of workplace literacy resources were also developed. Again, a sample, you have Intro to Employment Services, looking at financial management for newly employed workers, digital tools that you use in the workplace, all different types of resources that support people in work or people who are trying to access work or gain the skills they need to start to look for work. Again, on the bottom of each of these slides, it's the link to that Google Doc where you can see the full list that was developed, and also be able to directly link to the resource itself if it has been added to the resources forum. Any questions about the variety of resources that were developed in phase 2 before I talk a little bit about the last kind of group of resources? No. Let's check my chat. Okay, next slide. So last but definitely not least was the LBS eChannel resource development. And in 2023-2024, the 5 eChannel programs developed 27 new resources under the Expanding and Enhancing Digital Delivery theme. These resources were developed primarily for use within eChannel programs, and they're all hosted on the individual program's learning management system. We did do annotations for those resources on the resources forum site, so you can see an overview of what these courses or modules are about. And that's in the digital delivery eChannel section. So I'm going to just, in the next slide, we're going to give you, again, a sample of some of the things that were developed that are available or will be made available as through the eChannel organizations now and over the next little while. So ACE Distance Online developed a communication support series, and it's a full series of online course modules that support communications. Good Learning Anywhere, they developed a variety of different new courses, including Introduction to Virtual Reality, which is becoming very popular, and Truth and Reconciliation Beyond the 94, also very relevant to that stream. Deaf Learn Now, which is part of George Brown College, focused on a newcomer ASL and Communications for Independence series. And they also worked on some basic budgeting modules to support their audience. The Learning Hub really focused on online learning that supports all the different Google tools that are available right now. As we know, as many of you might know, most Google tools are free to access, and they're becoming very, very popular. Many organizations use Google as well, so they really focused on making sure that they had curriculum in place so that people understand and are able to utilize all of the software effectively. Last but not least, Formation à distance, and I'm sure I did not pronounce that correctly at all. My apologies. They also did a series on learning about popular apps or applications, and also creating a username and password for a new email address. So a digital focus on the curriculum that they developed. So there's a lot of new eChannel curriculum that's either been updated or developed through this current phase, and then actually through the first phase as well. There was a lot of new material developed. So again, just as practitioners, as programs, always remember that eChannel is a great partner for you. Individual programs can't always do everything, and sometimes there are courses available through eChannel that your learner can really better remind people of. Okay. Next slide, please. I just want to pause for a second to make sure that I am still stable. I just had a message that my internet was unstable.
You faded in and out for a moment, Robyn, but you're good again now.
Okay, thank you, Barb.
Okay.
Okay, another resource that was developed last year through this funding, and it was not part of the main resources that were developed, but it was something that a few organizations took on. In particular, Barb's organization kind of organized and ran this, was the LBS Skills for Success case studies. So these case studies are also posted on the resources forum site under the success stories link. The purpose of doing some case studies were twofold. One was really to provide the ministry with some other information or documentation outside of what they were going to collect through the CAMS data that they were getting about the pilots that took place last year. And the other was to make sure that we had captured some legacy information for the field, where they could go and look at some of the pilots that took place and how they, what they did and how they were able to be successful. So the case studies cross the 3 different Skills for Success themes, including Better Jobs Ontario, underrepresented groups, and workplace. And there's 17 of these case studies available that you can take a look at. Finally, because there were so many resources developed, there were some promotional resources developed to help people know what resources were available, and also to give the support organizations some materials where they could promote all of the things that were developed to the LBS programs. Being an LBS in an LBS program, it can be overwhelming when you have an influx over 2 years of over 300 new resources. That's even more overwhelming to be able to kind of look at, figure out, see what's available. So 3 different types of resources were developed. The first were a set of social media posts. These were really developed for the support organizations to use to promote the resources. A series of infographics that have links and or QR codes that take you directly to the resources were also developed. And finally, some online flip books were developed, which give a summary of the resources for each of those Skills for Success themes. So this was specific to the first group of resources that were developed in 2022, 2023, but this work was done last year. Next slide. So I'll just walk you through quickly. So here's an example social media post for LBS. There's a number of posts, social media posts that were made available to the support orgs. There's a link here. You can take a look if you want. If you are a support org, you can access those and promote the resources. Next slide. Infographics. So a number of infographics were also developed. And if you click on this link, it will take you to the site that we used to kind of organize everything for this project. And there's a number of different infographics available in each of the theme areas. The infographics are kind of nice because what you can do is print them off, or you can use them digitally. And if you're having a staff meeting and you want to learn about some of the new workforce literacy resources, for example, of which this is the example, if you look at those infographics, they're going to link you directly to those resources. So it's just another way to see what was developed, but categorized or kind of packaged up for programs. And next slide. The other thing that we did is we created a series of flip books, one for each theme or category. So these flip books, in the presentation itself, if you download it or access it next week, these tiles are actually all hyperlinked. So if you click on it, it's going to take you directly to the flip book. The flip book is just another way to see what was developed. There's a page for each resource. They're also linked directly to the resources forum, so you can access the resource itself, but it gives you just a different way to kind of figure out what was developed under each of the categories. So those are other ways that you can take a look at what was developed. We tried to come up with as many different ways as possible, just because of the overwhelming number of resources that were developed. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. It was a fantastic opportunity for us to be able to really do some development work and finally be able to have some new resources in the field. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to change gears and I'm going to talk about the community of communities of practice. So this isn't the only definition of what a community of practice is. It's just a very common one that's used. And it's a group of people who share a concern or passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. So I think that I can very easily say that anybody who is working in literacy is passionate about it, who has been around for more than a few years. And I think the opportunity to be able to meet regularly and talk about things was a great opportunity that came out of the Skills for Success projects that happened. Slide. So the communities of practice started in 2022, and actually we've continued them into 2025, hoping to continue the great discussions that were happening. All the organizations participating in Skills for Success Phase 1 and 2 were invited to participate in one or more of the theme-based community of practice groups, depending on what they were working on, or what their role was in those projects. These groups have been meeting regularly, usually monthly or bi-monthly, since late in 2022. And we have continued to make sure that they are going to happen through the next fiscal year. The structure has been revised slightly in the current fiscal year because we're no longer being funded through these Skills for Success projects, but we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity, as I said, to continue these conversations. There are 5 communities of practice for this current fiscal year. 4 of the 5 are led by regional networks. So you have the Supporting Apprenticeship Integration, and that one is being chaired by Kiel Halton Duffer and Adult Literacy Network. Matt Schulman chairs that. You have the Pathway Planning Centralized Assessment Community of Practice. That's being supported by the Adult Basic Education Association. Sarah Gill is chairing that. This is the former Better Jobs Ontario Community of Practice, but it has been revised to more broadly include pathway planning and centralized assessment. So it's just a broader look at it. It still includes Better Jobs Ontario in those discussions, but it's a much broader discussion at this point. And that happened kind of morphed over the Skills for Success project, and it made sense going forward to make that a wider discussion. Supporting underrepresented groups is being chaired by the Rideau Ottawa Valley Literacy Network. And that's Lisa Ombe is the executive director, so she actually chairs that group. And the Workplace Literacy Community of Practice is being chaired by Literacy Link South Central. Tamara Cottery is chairing that. Again, workplace literacy has been expanded beyond just workplace literacy, of which the focus was in the Skills for Success projects, to a broader understanding of workforce as well. So not just delivery in a workplace, but also all the work that happens in a program to support participants that are going onto the workforce. If you're interested in participating in any of these community of practices this year, it's a pretty open invitation. It's really about people who are interested and want to learn from each other and talk about these issues. And we would just suggest that you talk to your own regional network executive director to find out how you can access these meetings.
Robyn, I just am going to interrupt. I see that Swati has his or her hand up.
Okay. Thank you.
Swati, I'm not sure if Stacy has to allow you to speak or if I can do that.
I think she gave her a mic, but she has to unmute, I believe.
So Swati, can you unmute? If not, if you're having any difficulty, please just feel free to type your question into the chat.
Okay, well, maybe we can continue, and if Swati does post, I can stop and either I'll answer it or you can answer it, Barb, depending on what the question
Sure.
is. Okay.
Okay.
So we can go to the next slide. So there is a fifth community of practice, and it includes the 10 provincial LBS support organizations. Laubach Literacy Ontario, the organization I'm the executive director of, and the College Sector Committee for Adult Upgrading, which Barb is the executive director of, co-chair this community of practice group. The participants include the executive directors and any staff they feel should participate in it. The regional network initiative-based community of practice leads also attend these meetings. So the leads from the previous slide that I just walked you through. And the purpose of this is to support planning, coordination, and info sharing related to resource development, professional development, the initiative-based community of practices, and also capacity building, all different things. So the idea with this group is to bring the sector and cultural stream perspectives together. All of the COPs are working this year to support LBS programming and also to have an opportunity to lend advice or give information to the ministry regarding what's happening in the LBS program. This slide gives you, back one, thanks. This slide is the landing page for the Skills for Success Community of Practice website. This website was set up during the first phase of the Skills for Success project, and it also was used last year. And it was a place to really capture information that was happening around the integration of some of these initiatives, meetings that were being held, information in general, notes from the meetings that were being held, any information that the ministry was providing, and some of the research that was done and information about Skills for Success. So it's a site that still exists. We are updating it as new information is put forward. So it is a place to go and find out information about the community of practices that have happened and continue to happen through the current fiscal year. Okay. Again, ministry priorities related to the Skills for Success projects were about informing the development of a funding model for LBS. How much does program development and delivery really cost? So some of the information that they were trying to collect, especially through the pilots, was related to that. They also are looking to inform the full implementation of the LBS performance management framework. The framework itself has been in place for quite a while, but it has never been fully implemented. And last, the idea or the priority, one of the last priorities was just to support LBS renewal, to start to look at all the different things that are happening in LBS that have happened over the last 10 to 12 to 15 years, and to start looking at what components need to be renewed and how to move that forward. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the content of the presentation. This is just kind of the agenda again of what we covered today. So we did the review of essential skills. We did a bit of a review. Barb provided a review of the skills for success, and she tried to show you how those things intersect and support each other, how OALCF, you can see OALCF in the new Skills for Success framework and vice versa. Tried to give you a fairly comprehensive overview of what happened during the Skills for Success project in both phase 1 and phase 2. An overview of the resources forum website where you can find or access all of the different resources that were developed through both phases of the project. We tried to highlight some of the resources that were in particular developed during phase 2, give you a bit of overview on the history of how the community of practices came into place and what is happening in the current fiscal year. And that kind of brings us to the end for us to be able to wrap up and take any questions or comments that you have.
Robyn, Nancy placed a question in the chat that I answered, just wondering if there would be some of those resources, the posts and infographics and flip books for the phase 2 resources. So, you know, that's a fair question. Right now, there is not funding that's been made available by the ministry for that to happen for phase 2 resources, but you never know. Maybe later this year. So it would be nice if perhaps that happened, and then we could have a set of those kinds of resources for both the phase 1 and 2 pieces. I don't see any other questions in the chat, Robyn. I think we're caught up. Okay, Lisa, do we have any sense of what the ministry is looking at for next steps? They haven't really said too much up till now, Lisa. The leads of each of the communities of practice do have a liaison meeting every couple of months with the ministry. We haven't had one over the summer. So I believe our next one is coming up in the next few weeks. I can't remember the exact date. And perhaps they'll have more information to share about their next steps sometime this fall, or really hard to say what their timeline is. Robyn, do you want to add anything to that?
Nope, I think you covered it. I mean, if one of the things that we're doing right now is they have invested some funds into developing some more standardized assessment tools. By that, I mean culminating tasks and milestones in the current fiscal year. That's obviously not part of the Skills for Success funding. That funding ended. So that's the challenge. It was project funding. It ended at the end of March. So continuing work based on that is challenging because there is no additional funding for that type of work, such as Nancy pointed out, or what you just spoke of, the infographics or flip books, like the promotional pieces. So that money has to come from somewhere else. And as Barb mentioned, I think one of the value added things that has come out of this is that conversation has been opened up again with the ministry. We've had the opportunity to start talking to people at the ministry again about the program, the importance of the program, the challenges of the program, and we're doing our best to kind of keep those things on the table and in discussions with the ministry.
Thanks for that question, Lisa. Not seeing another question just yet. Just wait one more minute in case anyone types anything else into the chat. I'll take this opportunity again to just encourage you to complete the evaluation when it pops up when you exit. That would be very helpful for us. It's very short. Lisa asks, what are we seeing from the SSM transformation with regard to workplace/employment training options that are potentially pulling away from the workplace literacy that are now being built by ES or the SSM administrators? I know I've seen quite a bit coming from Serco. So Lisa, I think broadly you're referring to the employment services transformation and the service system manager model under which employment services now operates. And the fact that some of those service system manager organizations have created some of their own resources around employment preparation, various other topics related to various other skills for success, and are using them in-house as opposed to perhaps referring their clients to an LBS program for that kind of programming. The ministry is aware that this is happening with many of those SSM providers, but they are not, to my knowledge, not doing anything to prevent those service system managers from creating those kinds of resources and mandating their use in-house by the employment services consultants for a variety of their clients. Exactly. Okie dokie then. I will say, I know, Lisa, you're from Southwestern Ontario, but it's a concern in other parts of the province with, Serco has more than one region, FedCap has more than one region as SSMs, and so some of what you're describing is fairly pervasive in various parts of the province, depending who the service system manager is and what they have created and mandated for their in-house use in terms of workplace workforce preparation. Your comment, we can't get a good read on the literacy components embedded in the common assessment. I don't know it well, but what I can say is that it really isn't a literacy assessment. In terms of what's in that common assessment that the employment services clients are now required to do. It's not a common assessment of literacy or numeracy skills. It's more of a common assessment of life situation barriers, previous education, but not so much a literacy assessment. In fact, not a literacy assessment, but more of a screener in terms of whether the client could perhaps benefit from a referral to LBS or other kind of training or upgrading. I will also say that there are some issues that the employment services providers are now experiencing the way the common assessment tool functions. And I think they're hoping that some improvements will be made to it, to just speak very generally. Yeah. Yes, slow or not happening, Lisa. I see your comment in the chat there as well. Any other comments or questions that anyone would like to raise before we sign off? Well, I will thank you very much for participating today. Many thanks to our ASL interpreters, Carolyn and Melissa, and for the S5 Dynamic Learning Initiative, formerly Deaf Literacy Initiative, for providing the ASL interpretation today. And thank you also to Stacy from Contact North for providing our tech support, and Heather from Quill Network, who is on the pop-up PD committee as well. And Heather is always here in the background, just in case we need some extra support or extra help through the webinar. So, and of course, many thanks to my colleague, Robyn. It's always a pleasure to work with you, Robyn. And so thank you for our collaboration today.
And you as well.
Oh, I just see a couple of other messages. Lisa, you're most welcome. We enjoy doing these webinars, so we're glad if they're useful. So thanks for that comment. And thank you for the other positive comments and acknowledgements in the chat as well. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the week and a great, I'm not going to say last summer weekend, but just a great long weekend.